Hey, what's up, everyone? How you doing? Hopefully, everyone's having a good Tuesday morning or Tuesday afternoon, depending on when you're watching this video. Or if you live in Australia, okay, good evening. Okay, or Japan, good evening. Okay, so this video it's something that I have covered on my previous videos last year, probably more than once, 3 or 4 times. And I felt like, well, maybe it's time that I go back to it. Maybe it's time that I rehash and go through these Apple TV 4K settings again. If you are somebody who is familiar with the Apple TV 4K and you've been using Apple TV 4K now for quite a while, so you're pretty much familiar on the settings and whatnot, then you can skip this video. You don't need to watch this video. Or if you maybe want to check again to see if there's something you missed on my previous videos that I did last year. So I'm kind of revisiting this. Okay. All right, so what do we got here? This is Apple TV 4K. It's a 64 gigabyte version. What you're looking at, it's a Samsung Q8FN 55-inch television. That's my Hue Philips lights that I just used to put something on top of the TV. It looks kind of hideous, but that's just me. Everything it's an out of the ordinary kind of a style with me. Okay, so it is what it is. You can laugh about it. It's fine. But let's get back to this video. All right, so you bought your Apple TV 4K. You connected your Apple TV 4K. You're using your HDMI 2.0, or let's say maybe you're using Belkin ultra high speed HDMI. Doesn't really matter whichever of these two HDMI cables you use, they will get the job done. It's just that I recommend having a ultra high speed Belkin HDMI cable because it's only $30 and it's future proof. It works. I have 8 of those. I love it. So the first thing you want to do is go to your settings. Okay, this is the most important part. Okay. And the settings is something you can find very easily. Just scroll down here on your user interface app right here where it says settings next to YouTube. You click on it. Now, once you get to your TV settings, let me adjust my exposure. That's what that is the exposure coming from the light. That's how bright this TV is. What you want to do is scroll down where it says video and audio. Click on video and audio. Now, this next segment, this next step, it might be confusing to some of you because maybe you don't understand on, excuse me, I cannot talk today. Maybe you're not familiar with the type of process that Apple TV is using to send out the signal to the HDR and how they utilize the HDR. So for you, this might be a bit confusing, but just stay with me. Follow step by step and you will understand. Hopefully by the end of this video you will understand exactly why they're doing it this way and why I'm also recommending that you do it this way. So first let me show you the step that is recommended. Okay, this is not something that I invented. This is not something that I am preaching to you as my own kind of a shtick. This is something that Apple TV and other professionals and other audio video files out there, they're recommending that you do this. Okay, this is recommended by professionals and it's recommended by the Apple that you do the next following steps. All right. Now, majority of you going to click where it says enable HDR and majority of you going to hit try HDR. But you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. And I will get to that at the end of this video. The most important part that you need to do here, if you want to utilize the best possible performance and if you want to utilize the best possible content. Whether you're watching HDR, Dolby Vision, Dolby Atmos, or Dolby Digital Surround Sound, if you want to have the best possible content being presented from your Apple TV 4K onto your TV, this is the steps that you should implement. All right, so you're going to say, well, Mr. 4K, but sir, how come you're not enabling HDR? And then you're going to say, why is your format 4K SDR? What's going on here? And why is your Chroma 420? I will explain to you why this is. But first thing first, this is the most important part. This is the most important part right here, and I want you guys to pay attention to this. Match content. What does this mean? The match content basically means is that when you are watching a standard 1080p movie or a program that doesn't support HDR, this match content will automatically decode that content. It will match it to its original form, meaning that when you're watching that 1080p upscale to 4K HD movie without HDR, you're going to get the best possible standard dynamic range on 1080p upscale to 4K, and you're going to get the best possible frame. So that way at the 24p at that frame, you're going to get that exact same frame that that content was intended for. So this is something that's very crucial and important if you want to utilize the best possible accurate content that's being presented. Because remember, not all of your movies will be HDR. Not all of your programs will be HDR. Some of them will be 1080p, upscale to 4K. Okay? So that's the important factor here. These two are the very important steps that you need to do. Now let's get back into format. 4K SDR format. A lot of you are going to say, well, Mr. 4K, I don't understand. Why are you selecting the 4K SDR instead of 4K HDR? Well, here is the main reason why you don't want to do it. Yes, if you want to, you have the option. The Apple is not going to stop you. No one's going to stop you. This is the preference. You have the option, if you choose to do so, to force 4K and HDR. You have the ability to force HDR non-stop to be running on your Apple TV 4K. The problem with this is the fact that when you are forcing HDR on a user interface that it's not intended to be 4K, that it's not intended to be 10-bit, that it's not intended to be running in high dynamic range, what happens is then the applications that you click on, all the other games that you play on, they will not play smooth, they will not look or respond in a way that they would if you didn't have that HDR forced. You do not want to force HDR. I'm trying to explain this to you in a layman terms, in the basic terms. I don't want to jump into a technical jogger, because if I jump into static metadata and how's that working, the tone mapping, listen, if I jump into the technical jogger, then you guys will fall asleep. What I'm trying to do here, I'm trying to give you and help you and give you some information in layman terms as to why you want to avoid forcing HDR. If you force HDR or Dolby Vision on your television and you leave it on at 60 hertz, then the movies that are not encoded to be HDR, the movies that are not encoded to be 4K and HDR, they will not look the best. They will look kind of bleak and washed out, will have funny colors. That's because you're forcing an HDR 10-bit into something that wasn't tone mapped to be that way. Okay, so this is why you want to avoid forcing HDR and Dolby Vision onto your Apple TV 4K. Now, if you want to do it, be my guest. I'm not going to stop you. That's your personal preference. It's your television. It's your device. Do what you like. I'm just here to tell you what it's being recommended by the Apple and other professionals. Okay, I will take my word from the Apple and from the professionals rather than just me using my own preference. So what you want to do is you want to keep it at 4K SDR 60 Hertz. Okay, because the user interface, it's using an 8-bit. It's not using a 10-bit. The user interface, it's not even running in 4K. It's being upscaled to 4K. Why? Because they want to make sure that your user interface, it's running smooth. They want to make sure that when you're clicking on the application, that application, it's not being forced by some HDR or Dolby Vision, static metadata, dynamic metadata. That will put a pressure, will put a lot of latency onto that application, because that application, it's not designed to run on HDR or Dolby Vision. Okay, because Apple TV 4K is not just a 4K HDR device. It has all the other different applications out there that don't support HDR and Dolby Vision. Okay, so this is why it's recommended that you keep it at 4K SDR. But now you're going to say, but if you do this, Mr. 4K, am I going to be able to utilize HDR? Yes, and I'm going to show it to you. Automatically, your HDR will be detected. And I'm going to give you that one example right now. I'm going to go back to Apple TV 4K, and I'm going to click on Transformers The Last Night, and you will see on the Transformers The Last Night, you will see that it will going to automatically switch to HDR. The only difference is I'll be getting the best possible HDR and the best possible frame that Studio has encoded and approved to Apple TV iTunes servers. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this. And I'm going to go to my movies. I'm going to click on Transformers The Last Night. I'm just going to turn the sound down because I don't want to get flagged. So I'm just going to leave it like that. Keep it at 0 or 1. That's fine. There we go. So I'm going to click on it. And you will see in a minute. Resume playing. And hold on. Let me just go to my Apple TV. Let me go to the source. Click on the Apple TV 4K and you will see HDR. There it is. HDR UHD. You see it right there? There it is. Okay, if you guys haven't seen it yet, let me show it to you one more time. Let me go to the source. Let me click Apple TV 4K, and there you will see it right there, HDR UHD. So it automatically detects HDR, but you're going to get the best possible HDR. See, this is the reason why you want to do it like this. Because me personally, I would rather have a more accurate representation of a film in terms of color, peak brightness, black digital levels, tone mapping, than to have something forced and not being properly rendered and tone mapped the way the studio intended. All right? Remember, this is something that's recommended. This is not something that I have imagined. This is not something that I'm, pulling out of my butt. This is recommended by professionals. As you can see here, it utilizes 4K and HDR, even though we're using 4K standard. All right, so you don't have to force HDR. But why is this also useful? This is also useful, for example, if I want to watch, let's say, for example, I want to watch Aliens. And Aliens, it's not in HDR. Well, guess what? I don't have that movie. Hold on a second. Let's try something else that's not supported. So anyway, I clicked on Resident Evil Afterlife. Resident Evil Afterlife doesn't support HDR, so this is only a 1080p standard version that I have. So right here I'm getting the best possible accurate standard dynamic range with 1080p Blu-ray quality from the Apple iTunes, okay? Because remember, not all of your movies will be in HDR, okay? Some of your movies will be in 1080p. So this is the main reason why you want to do it like this. When you play your video games, you want to make sure that your video games are run properly. You don't want to force HDR, static metadata, or dynamic metadata into something that's not utilized. Like if you're watching YouTube, you don't want to use HDR and Dolby Vision forced into it. Okay? So remember, there's a reason why they want you to keep it like this. You don't have to enable HDR. All you have to do is just keep the format at standard dynamic range 4K. Keep your chroma at 420. Keep your HDMI output at YC-BCR. And the most important part, obviously, is your match content. Keep your match dynamic range on and your match frame on. So these two are very important to be kept on. Well, there you have it, guys. Hopefully this video, even though this is not my first video, I think I've done like 3 or 4 videos based on this. And I don't know how some of you can't find those videos. I got over 3,600 videos. Projectors, speakers, receivers, you name it. It's all there. All you have to do is type in my name in conjunction with that product and it will show up. There's a reason why those videos are out there. There's a reason why I didn't delete those videos. They're out there so it can help you out. Well, again, 3,600 videos. They're all there for you. All you have to do is type. Like this video. Just type my name in conjunction with 4K, Apple TV 4K, and it will show up. Again, hopefully this helps you. Like I said, this is what's recommended. It's recommended by the Apple TV 4K, by Apple. It's recommended by professional calibrators, recommended by all the video, audio files, all the professionals out there, home theater geeks, you name it, they all recommend that you do this. And I recommend for you to do this as well, but you don't have to. If you feel that you don't have to and you want to force the HDR and Dolby Vision, be my guest. That's your choice. But I'm just letting you know this is the best way to experience Apple TV 4K. Okay? There you have it. Thank you for watching. And I'll see you guys today with my PlayStation VR Ace Combat 7 live stream. I'm going to try to upscale the PlayStation VR. We're going to unlock some more jet fighters and stuff like that. I know I still have to do projectors, and I'm kind of behind on projectors, but I will work on it as soon as I get time. I've been very busy lately, but as soon as I have time, I will work on the projectors. I got some tips for the projectors, 1080p projectors, and 4K pixel shifted projectors as well. They go beyond Rec 709. We'll talk about Rec 709 as well on there. So, well, there you have it. Thank you for watching. Cheers. Have a good one.